Hey everybody, Tyler McVicker, and this is the 100 Views podcast. This is a podcast that's only going to get 100 views because Artifact only has 100 players. And these are the 4 of the 100 players.
Hello, what's popping? I stream on Twitch and I make YouTube videos. I'm just meat the max like Pepsi. I don't know what else to say.
We are also joined by this strong guy above me, Grappler.
Hi, I'm Grappler. I stream Artifact. That's pretty much it.
And he's a strong guy. And then the guy opposite corner from me up there, we got Trunk.
I am Trunk or Trunkwool, if you want to say the whole thing. But I go by Trunk because I don't want people to say 2 syllables instead of 1. I also stream Artifact, probably the most out of the 4 of us. I usually stream like 6 or 7 days a week, 7 or 8 hours a day.
And that's just Artifact the whole time.
Just Artifact, yeah.
So you single-handedly are producing about 5% of the revenue for Valve right now. Before we talk about any of the juicy deets, insider information that we may or may not know or understand, we're going to talk about the general gist of the community right now, the things that you've probably heard many times before, but we're going to just get it out there, what our opinions about Artifact currently are. So, Grappler, within the next 6 months, what do you think the game is going to need to be able to actually regain some players?
It's tough. I mean, if you would have asked me when the game was first coming out, I think it would have been a lot less. But with the negative reception the game has gotten so far, I would say it needs a really big overhaul. Generally speaking, I think it needs 2 things. It needs, first of all, some kind of hook that brings people to play more games. For me, it's a game where I enjoy myself the first 2 hours a lot. After that, it becomes a bit of a grind because there's really no clear objective I'm going for. It's just winning games. There really is no, I have achieved this at the end of the day. I have gotten a higher ranking either. I have gotten closer to qualifying for said tournament. There's nothing really, it's just games. So I would say some form of progression. It could be official tournaments where you try to qualify for a big tournament, something like an MMR system, even grinding out cosmetics. I don't know, but there has to be, in my opinion, something that drives people to come back every day and say, okay, just one more game and I'm closer to my objective.
I do agree. It's kind of a grind as well. And not that I hate grinds. Like, I've played Path of Exile. I love grinding. I would just play like 10 hours a day, just killing monsters. But at least in Path of Exile, you have a goal, right? There's progression. You're working towards something. And Artifact is really, really missing that. I play Gauntlet, Draft, and a bit of Constructed, and it's kind of the same in both. You just, after a while, you're just kind of repeating yourself. You're just playing the game over and over with a little bit of variance in each game. But yeah, what are you really working towards? A rank 72, 73? I don't think anyone really cared about the ranking system right now. And on top of that, the ranking system doesn't really work because there's not enough people for it to kind of work properly, like in Dota.
I wonder how much impact on fun it will have when the second expansion comes, like just having more cards available. Do you think that will fix the fun aspect? Because then you won't see the same decks over and over again in Constructed.
Currently, we know about mutations and we know about a single improvement, but generally mutations are going to be the major addition that's going to change how the game is played. In relation to RNG specifically, the other major TCGs, digital trading card games, digital collectible card games, there really is never a position where a player in a card game is capable of producing a deck in Constructed where you're going to have a consistent over like 90% win rate. And now in Constructed, you're up against like 3 decks, or you're just new to the game and you don't own all the cards yet, which that kind of player doesn't even exist in the ecosystem currently.
I think Constructed is a different beast than Draft. Like, I like Draft a lot more because you get a new deck every time, right? So there's a lot more variability. And when you play Constructed, you tend to play the same deck over and over and over. With like making little changes. Draft, I guess you can probably have more fun overall just because it's mostly a new experience every time you play Gauntlet. But the downside to that is the competitive side of the game will be Constructed, and that's where all the money is going to be as well.
I don't know. I find Constructed more fun than Draft. I love the part where you actually draft the deck. I like the drafting part. I like the building the deck part. But once I've built the deck and go into the actual games, I just prefer the constructed games. I find the draft games to be a bit more simplified and value-oriented in terms of how you play the game, whereas constructed is more understanding your opponent's decks and knowing how to play against those specific decks. I think the skill ceiling of draft comes entirely on how you draft the decks. what cards you pick, how you put together the perfect deck with the options you were given. But when it comes to the games themselves, the play part of the game, I think Constructed has the higher skill ceiling in terms of gameplay.
I just had a thought. Somebody else has probably thought this, but what makes auto chess very addicting is the gambling aspect of it, that you reroll for heroes and there you got the third bounty hunter and you got a level 2 bounty hunter. I wonder if that's the same with when you draft cards and open packs during draft. That's what makes that, because Grappler said that was his favorite part of drafting. And I also really like that part. And I wonder if that's what more RNG like that is maybe what Artifact needs. More like feeding into the gambling addiction that is so natural for humans.
Ooh, well, the difference between something like Artifact and auto chess is how much money have you spent on auto chess, Anger?
As for the money spending aspect, one thing really that did surprise me and I expected to see from the beginning, I don't understand why they didn't introduce foil cards with very low draw percentages in the packs, because other than just having another reason to open packs, just throwing a random number, let's say every card has a 1 in 1,000 chance of being a foil. Automatically, almost every card is free in the market, because at the end of the day, the only expensive cards are going to be the foils. Right away, the game is almost free to play. You might be able to get a full collection for $20. And that literally makes the game extremely cheap. And it doesn't even affect Valve much, I don't think, if people are opening packs just for the foils. So I'm very surprised they didn't implement that, because it lowers the entry for the normal player.
Yeah, I've been waiting for foil cards or cosmetics forever. I mean, Valve already does this. TF2, CSGO, Dota, they know this. Where are they? It's not like you're taking resources away from the dev team, right? They have graphical artists. They're making imp hats and foil cards. They don't affect the game gameplay wise. They're just there to look at. And they're nice. You can make money off of them. We can spend money on them. It would add so much to the game. And yeah, it would make pack opening experience much more fun.
My only concern would be at this point, if they did it, everyone would scream that Valve is not fixing the game and are just putting more reasons for people to buy packs and that are selling out even further. But yeah. I think if they implemented it, even if they do implement it now, eventually, once the market stabilizes, I think it would just be a good move overall.
Why haven't cosmetics happened? Why weren't they day one? Why weren't they something that Valve valued to be able to push out as early as they did?
Well, because the game isn't free to play. So they maybe they felt like that would be too greedy to go for both cosmetics and having the game cost money, and I kind of agree with that, but like that's what everyone thinks. It should have just been free to play with cosmetics.
It could be, but they wouldn't be able to give you the packs. You know, when you pay the $20, they do give you packs and tickets. And I think the total value of those exceeds $20, does it not? So if they just remove all that stuff and say, here's the game, but you're not getting anything, problem solved, right? It's technically already free to play. You're just paying for packs and tickets that come along with it.
But that opinion will label you as a Valve shill yourself. Like, people watching will be like, if you have that opinion, you'll be like, fuck you, no it's not, I just paid $20. But no, yeah, I have that same exact opinion. So I want to follow up on what Grappler said with the cosmetics versus, well, they can't do it now because they're selling out. So essentially, from what I know, they didn't do it because they were rushing the game out. This is very apparent right now, that the game came out in like an early access beta state or whatever. So there's one of a couple things that have possibly happened, and the one theory, which is more of a baked in a rumor that has some evidence being floating around. The people that talk about the behind the scenes Valve stuff have said this a few times. So Valve is shipping a Half-Life VR title very soon. And obviously they haven't shipped a Half-Life title since 2007. And that's probably the thing that the fans want more than anything, right? I think we can all agree. Half-Life 3, even if someone like Anger still hasn't played Half-Life, and I don't know if Grappler has played Half-Life at all, but...
Are you serious right now?
Yeah, so...
Get her out.
Imagine what the reaction to whatever this Half-Life VR title would have been if they didn't have that buffer of Artifact already out to like temper people's expectations of what the company is capable of currently. So imagine that they, instead of releasing Artifact or talking about it until like this TI, and then they put out whatever HLVR ends up being like this summer, which is what it seems like it'll be, people would lose their shit because that's not what they want. But after Artifact disappointed everybody, they're like, well, they did Artifact, so who the fuck cares? Of course they did that. You know what I mean? and they still have room to be able to improve the game. They're working on Set 2, obviously. Set 2 is going to have quite a few different things, but it has been developed and pretty much produced since before the game even came out. Richard Garfield straight up said that. Mutation cards are the thing to be able to change up the gameplay, and the way that works is it's an added ability to any of the heroes or creeps that requires a holder and then another card, both of which have to be drawn, so it's a very difficult thing to be able to play, and those mutations across the board have very little, if any, downside. They're like full buffs. There's a list of some of the mutations we currently know about. One of my friends got the cards working in-game in a deck. They're just buffs. They're like added abilities buffs for different creeps and heroes, and they're like an extra item. Another thing you're going to be seeing is a push for cosmetics. Unfortunately, the only thing we have not seen any evidence for are the foil cards. We've seen imp cosmetics, board cosmetics, even cosmetics for the victory and defeat screens, customizable menus, customizable music, changing the imps models, so new imps altogether like couriers. And I think it's because, like what Grappler said, they don't want people being like, well, now they want us to like purchase like unusual cards now. Oh, how far are they going to sell out? But if it's just hats on imps, no one's going to bat an eye because everybody's predicting that.
If it's only cosmetics that are non-card based, like as in cosmetics that are not coming from opening packs, is there a chance that maybe they're planning, or maybe it's part of planning, to make something like a compendium for a big tournament coming up? Because that would make sense. You have compendium levels for these, and they can't come from packs, otherwise you have to remake the pack system. So it has to come from somewhere outside of packs.
I've heard very little, if anything, about the tournament. As of now, we all know that the original plans for the 1 mil tournament have been canceled.
Right.
Q1 is almost over. They announced a $1 million tournament that was widely publicized. You're going to get a $1 million tournament one day. And I think it might be hilarious that the people that have stuck around may really benefit, because they might run it anyways with 100 players and everybody might win. So that would be cool.
Plan.
That's the plan. Grappler should just get fucking hired, because he's saying shit I haven't even thought of this at all, and I think about this all the time.
If they do a tournament, it would have to be after the international for Dota, right? Like, they would not put those two things close enough together. So the earliest I think an Artifact International would after August, like November, December, or even the year after. So there's no way it's coming before the international this year, right? It's got to be impossible.
At this point, yeah, it is totally impossible, because they're working on V2. I understand why we would think it would be a terrible idea to shoehorn an Artifact TI as like day 3 for TI 9. Just day 3 is just Artifact, and everything else is Dota 2. Everybody would be pissed.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
However, that might happen. Because unfortunately they may want to just try and get the most eyes to it. And if they brand an event as an Artifact-only event, right now they're up against probably one of the most difficult challenges they've ever faced as a company. And a lot of the people that are on the team were not around for their last biggest challenge, which was like 2003, when the source code to Half-Life 2 leaked a year before the game came out, and they had to try and ship the game anyways. Why do you think the team and Valve, A, even did Artifact in the first place, and B, thought they knew how the game would have been successful, and made all of the decisions that they made that led us to the point that we're at right now? Not just shipping the game in an incomplete state, but shipping the game with certain features that have been like, when they announced the game, there was no ladder. It was supposed to just be a social game, and opening packs was the main focus of everything. You can't trade cards, even though that is a feature Steam has, and it's literally flipping a switch. Why?
Well, I think one of the main problems is that the entire way they did it is very outdated compared to, like, if you just look at Apex, the new big game right now, it's free to play. Hearthstone, it's free to play. I think it's you who told me this once, that Valve kind of just thinks because they're Valve, they can do whatever they want and people will play it anyways. And I think that's maybe one of the biggest mistakes, that they didn't actually look at what actually works right now, you know? They just did what they wanted to do and thought it was going to work anyways. I think it was also maybe a mistake to just get the biggest personalities in the closed beta and then just expect them to give a favor back by keep streaming the game, instead of actually, paying the big streamers to stream the fucking game. And not just, say, I love this game and then never play it.
Well, I think the last thing you said was about trading up being enabled. I think they don't have trading enabled because of the whole CSGO gambling thing. If you can trade cards, you can trade them to third parties and sell them for real money. And that's a big problem because we all know that CSGO gambling thing went on and it was a disaster. They had to put a 7-day cooldown on CSGO trades. If they did enable trading in artifact cards, I think they'd have to do a similar cooldown. Otherwise, you got the whole third party money making gambling scheme going on, and Valve, like, the government's being involved now. Like, they have lawyers and class action suits, so Valve can't really just get away with, they're not worth anything, guys. They're just skins, Their value is technically zero.
So 3 things I can think of. First of all, I think that Valve probably thought they can't fail on the Artifact launch, and most likely figured that even removing certain core parts of the game is not a really big deal. They can reintroduce them at any point they want. They probably thought that the name of Dota was too big to really crash the way it did. They thought maybe it'll not do as well as we're hoping, but I doubt anyone even thought it was a possibility to do as bad as it is now. Now, they were really behind in their release date. People were starting to complain. I think they were very slow and really drew out the whole hype phase. People were very hyped for a while, and then as it was drawn out, people started getting negative. And I assume there was a lot of internal pressure to drop it as fast as possible because at the beginning, there was a lot of hype. Sure, there was a lot of negative reception too, but the community who did want the game was very hyped for it. And as that started getting sour and turning into negativity with no new news coming out, that together with the fact that they figured there's no real big chance of failure, I think they were trying to drop the game as close to possible to the release date they announced. So I have a weird theory about release dates and when you announce games. I know it's the trend, you take a month or 2 like Blizzard does with Hearthstone, you release a few cards at a time so people get hyped for the game. But if you look at games like, let's say, Apex Legends just came out, or even much, much older games like Ark Survival, when those games were announced, it was right before it was released. There is a sense of discovery when you see a new game come out, nobody knows anything about the game. It falls into place, and then everyone goes in there with a fresh start. I think Artifact's biggest issue was that they gave you so much time to prepare for the game. They gave so many people enough time to learn the game that when it did come out, it didn't feel like a new game. It felt like a game you've been playing in your head for months or maybe even more. And all of a sudden, the entire meta solved, there's nothing to discover. And while Hearthstone does this in a sense in slow card release, I don't think it's the best approach, especially for something like a deck building game. I think releasing 1 or 2 cards is fine, but even Hearthstone, they do their big dumps right towards the end. Whereas Artifact, they had the biggest streamers, pro players already set up full deck compilations of tier 1 decks the moment the game came out. No one had anything new to do.
One thing also, I think that the open beta was a mistake because it wasn't really a beta and it wasn't really open. You had to get those keys from either begging to content creators or going to PAX or TI. You should have been able to buy early access, or they should have just not made the beta 1 week long. Like, I think that the whole open beta, a lot of people criticized the closed beta, but I think the open beta was a much bigger problem. It made a lot of people just not get a bad taste for the game.
So the open beta only ever happened because Gabe announced it. That's the only reason it happened. He came out and said, in October, you're going to get a beta. Everybody here at TI gets a free access into the beta. That's the only reason it happened. And apparently, that was just decided almost days before they made that announcement.
Wow.
Something about Valve that needs to be stated very strongly is how little planning actually happens outside of you're in the team, you had a whiteboard meeting, and you planned out what you're designing for that week in that whiteboard meeting. That's it. Something that Grappler stated about how everybody was playing it in their heads for months before the game came out. Not only is that exactly what happened, but I was a victim of that. I made my own set and played it paper with my fiance, who love her. Everything Valve did for Artifact feels like it came out of 2007. In that, they announced the game and then didn't give any information on the game for 6 months. And then we saw the game and then slowly found out, there's 1,000 people already playing this. But it's a secret club. And then they announce a beta over a year after the game was announced, and then the beta was delayed, and then the beta was a week, and people were mad because Anger spent $60 on the beta before she got into the closed. Like, this was if this was 2007 and they were announcing Team Fortress 2 and they were showing off something 2 years before at E3 or something, that's how they used to do game announcements. But that was before you had YouTubers who dissected every little bit that was possible to dissect and try and make people like learn as much as possible. Things move so quickly nowadays that something like Apex Legends is how things are done. You hear about a game, it's out. Go play it. And the entire world has to figure out the game together. Whereas they had 1,000 people learning the game months in advance, where you had someone like Fwash who came out and said, well, I have 4,000 hours in the game, you know, and it was August. The game wasn't out for 3 months. Like, they haven't released anything for so long that they're stuck in the old mindset, and that screwed them over. By that same token, Valve's name does not equal success anymore. Their name is no longer synonymous with high-quality software. It's synonymous with Steam. That's it. Dota is not always connected to Valve because Valve does not keep up to date with Dota in the same way that any other major games-as-a-service platforms are. Dota gets really slow updates. Now, I mean, you could be a TF2 fan and yell because they get even slower updates.
Oh, boy.
But compare that to literally, and like Warframe, for example, which gets content like weekly. It's not even close. And that's good for the long run because they're learning. But for people that bought into the hype, they were burned. And will those people return to the game? Like, there were people that were definitely burned from this multiple times. People were burned when they bought the PAX codes on eBay and found out that the beta was only 1 week long. We joke about that, but they lied. People were burned when they promised they were never going to adjust the cards, so they bought into the cards as like bonds, and then they adjusted the cards. They lied. And then people were burned when they promised high communication, and then they disappeared because they were wrong. They lied.
So yeah, I agree. Valve dropped the ball on Artifact, and sure, I guess they did tarnish some aspect of their name as a software developer with this failed release. Though personally, as a gamer, I would still buy into any Valve game that came out immediately because they didn't fuck. Sorry, what kind of language?
You can swear. It's fine.
They didn't really fuck up on the game. I think the game is fantastic. Sure, there's aspects messed up. There's things that need to be fixed, but I think the game itself, it's not a quick cash grab. It's not something they did to steal your money. It's a well done game that they made a really big mistake in terms of marketing, in terms of some part of gameplay that didn't attract the right kind of players or enough players. As a software company, if I heard of Valve games coming out tomorrow, I would immediately be hyped regardless. So at least for me, there is no tarnishment in the sense that I don't trust another software company because they have done cash grabs and thrown out huge microtransactions and ruined their. They didn't do that. It was a mistake, but not a mistake that feels like they intentionally screwed us over.
What would you have wanted to see the game ship with that it is missing right now?
Like Grappler said, the game is fantastic mechanically. Like Richard Garfield, everybody loves to hate on the guy and attribute him with the failure of Artifact, but it's not his fault. He did his job. It's such a good game. Like, I still play the game 3 months now, and it's a good game, right? There's just everything else is missing. The marketing team fucked up. The Q&A testers, I guess, were the closed beta people. I know it's easy to hate on them as well, but does Valve do Q&A testing anymore? They just hire, they just say, here, you want to test our game, and we're not going to pay you. And these are the people like Swimstream and Fwash, right? And they're the Q&A testers now.
There is no marketing team. That does not exist at Valve.
Well,
the people that designed the game marketed the game. There is no marketing. QA was one of the hardest things they pushed in Portal 2, to the point where you can watch some GDC talks done by the designers of the games, which were also the writers, where they had the players play the game and had webcams pointing at the players so they could see the emotional reactions to people while they tested the game. That's how far they went. Artifact was only QA tested by the closed beta group, very much so. And the group grew over time. At the very first people you had were like Slacks, because there's evidence of Slacks being testing the game before the announcement. He like mentioned it in an interview that he'd played it before, and he was like, I mean, he lives in that area, so it's easier for him to go to the office, and that's essentially how they work. Proximity is more important than skill, blah blah blah. This game was a small team, and even though money is infinite at Valve currently, if you like, there is no budgetary process. Just do anything you think will add value to your project and you're going to be fine. the scarce commodity is employees' time. And since there is no marketing team, the people designing the game, trying to get it ready for launch, also had to market the game. That was a bad idea. Now that we know that they, instead of doing any kind of actual marketing push or paying streamers to be able to play the game or something like that, they overhyped for a year and a half and hoped that everybody wanted to play with the same set for like a year.
I think a lot of people are in hibernation right now. They actually really like the game. They're only waiting for the second expansion. So I think the second expansion will not only bring back all the players who left, or not all of them, but a large portion of them to give it a second try. But I also think that will make people talk about it more, and new players will maybe also try. And the ones who are already playing also will maybe have more fun with more cards. I think the second set needs to include not just new cards, but also a proper, like Trunk said, a proper ranked ladder, and also free to play and cosmetics, and I don't know, a mobile version, because I've heard a lot of people say that it needs to be on mobile, but I feel like the people who play Artifact are neither very young nor are they very casual. It's mostly tryhards in their 20s. So is mobile really what they should be investing so much time and money in?
That's the question I was waiting for somebody to ask. No! No, it isn't, because you bring up an excellent point. Valve is having an identity crisis right now. Because if you ask anybody who's younger, which is an incredibly important demographic, mind you, the young, the child Fortnite player or whatever, that is a demographic you want because they purchase the merchandise more than anybody. They purchase there's a lot of untapped income there. How many young people know who the hell Valve is anymore? They are not on anyone's map. So pushing a free-to-play game onto mobile that is really pretty and is super very fast positive reinforcement loop like a card game can be is exactly what they should do to be able to regain, a newer fan base as the people who were around for the Orange Box and Team Fortress 2 get into their 20s and 30s. Who is gonna who is the younger generation? There is no younger generation because there is no game for them to play. However, Artifact is one of the most complex fucking card games that has been released in recent times. What 10-year-old is going to very quickly pick up on Artifact when downloading it randomly on a tablet? They're gonna look at it and be like, fuck this, and that's it.
Do they really care about the young kids though? I mean, they must know it's a complex game and they're not going to play it anyways. But isn't shipping it to mobile not that hard anyways? It's just a port, right? How many people do they have working on that? I don't think it's that big a deal.
It's essentially the main focus right now.
Well, that's sad then. That should not be the case.
Well, they announced it, and there's a lot to unpack there. There is a general understanding that if it's on more devices, that automatically means more people. It's easier to digest. It's easier to access. What will end up happening is the free-to-play will bump it up. Obviously, the free-to-play update will bump it up. But I have a feeling the free-to-play update will launch at the same time as the mobile port, and that might get attributed more to the fact that it's on tablets than it being free-to-play. Because you have to remember, Newell was very much against making this game free-to-play. He thought it was a terrible idea, and Valve were the people that pushed free-to-play in the first place. They were the people that came up with the concept of putting out a game for free. They came up with that, and they didn't think this game should have been free-to-play.
I can think of 4 things. So on release, I would have immediately put multiple daily tournaments with a point structure to qualify for the international. That's one thing I would have done. That automatically gets people to grind a lot, play a lot, and keeps the player base high. That's what I expected to come out. Some way to qualify or some reason to play. For that, you can replace MMR or any other idea. Secondly, as I talked about before, I think adding cosmetic cards to the pack openings as a small chance would automatically make the game very cheap. Even cards like Axe would probably be under $1. So there is no more complaint about the game is too expensive. There's no more complaint tier 1 decks are $30. All of a sudden, tier 1 decks would be $5. Third, and they were planning to do this probably as well. So add card trading, or if you can't add it because probably they wanted to make money off of the marketplace or they had some other problem, at least add deck sharing as they were talking about. Because even if this is not going to be widely used, it's a cop-out for social media not to be able to say that people who can't afford anything can't play. So not even the poorest person in the world, if they have a friend with a deck, hey, lend me your deck to qualify for the TI. right away, you can no longer complain on Reddit, there's no way for me to qualify since I don't have money. And fourthly, I would have put like a really big leaderboard for who is closest to qualifying for the TI. It gives prestige to even the smallest player who's grinding it out. You put those four things together, and I'm sure Artifact would have done well in the beginning and probably stayed there. Now, I don't know if it's enough because the player base is really low, but that's what I would have done.
Yeah, I really like the idea of the tournaments being in its start, because I actually remember, I think it was a clip with either Slacks or Sunsfan, and they leaked something saying like they were in a tournament in the beta and like the winner got $200, right?
Okay.
It was like a small league, and it was like, don't say that. And that got me so hyped because I'm thinking like, okay, so on launch day, we're going to have tournaments, and maybe you can buy in with like Steam Wallet money, $5 entry fee, and it pulls it all up. You play the tournament. The winner walks away with $100 in their Steam Wallet. I would play that every day.
Yep.
Like organized tournaments in the client, like it must be possible. They already have Chaos Blitz. I love Chaos Blitz. They added that, and nobody plays it, but it was super fun. It was a nice game mode. But yeah, the idea of winning money, even if it's Steam Wallet money, it's still money, right? It seems such a simple thing to do. I don't know why they didn't have it in at launch, and it was leaked, wasn't it?
Those were just ploys to keep the high-profile people in the closed beta. They had zero intention of making that a feature. It wasn't done in client. They used a third-party website to organize the thing, and it was just, hey, you're in the closed beta. They held tournaments every couple weeks, and Valve put up money and you could win money, but it was just for closed beta people. It was just to test the game, and there was never talk of we're gonna do this on launch. It was just a thing that they were like, yeah, closed beta people are mostly just people that already have a following, and we want to keep these people here. So instead of like paying them like any other fucking game company does, let's make them compete for a paycheck. Ha! So,
Do you wait? So you really think that the tournaments was just to keep the beta testers still testing the game?
Yes, because the game was even smaller in the closed beta than it is now. Like, there were some features in the closed beta that aren't now here. There was an in-game chat like Dota's, where you could communicate with all of the players in the game in a region. No idea why that was taken out. And there was also the ability to play against bots of specific difficulty. Like, there were difficulty levels of bots to practice against decks. They took that out. No idea why. The closed beta was a mess. It was the most communicative Valve had ever been in their entire history of being a company. However, a significant problem became very, very obvious as soon as I was in it. And I'd hate people that, back a couple months ago when people were like, I'm in the closed beta, and they'd say it like 1,000 times. But everybody's just shocked that Valve's talking. No one's going to complain. No one's going to be like, hey, the game is not finished. Do you think maybe we could delay? Like, number one, if the closed beta had come together and been like, the game is not ready for November, they wouldn't have listened. Nobody wanted to say that anyways because it's Valve. And they're talking to you in a Discord chat like it's like nothing. Like it's just random friends. They've all stopped talking, by the way. That Discord chat still exists.
Well, no, people will come back. Like, there's a lot of people who streamed at launch and they left. They'll come back. They're just hibernating, as we say, right? The Artifact not dead, it's in a coma. So I do think once they release anything, like any kind of balance update or medium-sized update, people will come back, for sure.
Some people will come back, yeah, but what'll end up happening is if they don't push something that's really, really meaty, a lot of the hibernating people will eventually be like, okay, this isn't big enough for me to like, eventually even they're gonna leave.
Okay, so, I mean, I haven't really thought much about it, but top of my head, I would say hourly tournaments capped at who knows how many people depending on the player base. Those tournaments, top 5% get points. Let's say 1 point for the top whatever, 5 points for first place, blah, blah, blah. And you just rack up points. And you can go in as many of those as you want. You can rack up points. Now, the downside to that would be obviously that volume would be the reigning factor in the leaderboard. So whoever plays the most would just win automatically. Yeah. Maybe you would have to balance that out with something like you lose points if you're at the bottom, or just some sort of system. If they wanted to go the tournament format, that's how you would do it. Otherwise, you would use matchmaking to do it. But I think a point loss system would have to be implemented, just because otherwise, even if you're not a very good player, even if you're a 40% win rate player, if you played every single tournament, you would make it to top.
Cosmetic cards. We're calling these foils, obviously. But more specifically, what do you want to see? More so than just it's shiny. This isn't a physical card, so you need to do more than just it's shiny. Anger. What would you like to see out of a cosmetic card system to be able to make you more interested in collecting the special cards, even if they hold no real gameplay value?
Well, it could also be just a different card art of the same character, or a different, with introducing more lore. Because I think they've said in the past that for the next expansions they want to just evolve the lore, so you might see the same heroes over again, but in different states. That's like later in the history. But you can still do it in the same set with like Axe at a different, in the same time, but a different place, you know? A different artwork. And also something I really wanted, because I'm a really big Yu-Gi-Oh fan, is that when you place down the cards, the monsters pop up from the card.
Yes.
Like holograms and shit, you know? It's a digital card game, so why not?
I want Artifact VR. Exactly like Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
Fuck yeah.
You put the helmet on,
Oh,
you play your
man.
card, they pop up from the cards, they have animations and all that stuff. They already do this. It's at the International, right?
Yeah.
The stage, the heroes pop up. And you can, not in person, but like when you're watching it, they're there, right? It's 3D hollow representation of the heroes. It's possible. It's probably pretty simple. I mean, you can just take the model from Dota 2, import it into Artifact, pop it up on the card, right?
Yeah.
They already exist. There's so many things they can do. Like the possibilities are endless. It just surprised me they haven't done it yet, because it doesn't really take away. You don't have to balance this. It's all cosmetics. You don't have to change the game. Just put them in a crate, ask $2 for a key. Valve knows how to do this. It's already in all of their other games. It's frustrating it's not in there. Maybe they're holding out for just a big update, right? Maybe that's what they need, because even though it's kind of bad for me though, because I want to play now, I want new content now, and I want like small updates. I think a bigger update with everything might be better for bringing players back. Because like in the past, let's say Diablo 3, right? I played Diablo 3 on launch. It wasn't that good. I was a huge Diablo 2 fan. Diablo 3 comes up. I'm lining up at midnight. I get the pack, collector's edition. I bring it home. I can't play it because it's like error 37 thing. But then I play it for 1 or 2 months, right? And then I just stopped because it was like, okay, this game isn't that good. And then I guess a year or two later after that, whenever I hear people talking about Diablo 3, they're like, it's a pretty good game now. They changed it. They brought on a new game director. It's a great game. But nothing I heard made me want to actually go back and play it. Now, if they said, oh, they totally revamped the game, it's completely different. There's a huge update, like everything's new, I would probably actually go back and try it. So I think that's what Artifact actually needs. And I think that's probably what they're doing. They're just taking all the content that they're not going to release now, and they're just bundling it up into one massive update that they're going to ship in like a few months, which is probably the best idea. It's just kind of sad we don't get anything from now until then, most likely. I hope I'm wrong. I really hope I'm wrong. I hope they release some small stuff leading up to big stuff, but I don't know. Is that asking too much of Valve at this point?
There's not enough people on the team for that to be realistic.
Yeah. Probably ultra rare plus 1 armor to the cards. I'm just joking.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say, what the fuck?
I mean, you can do different art. Hex Online did that. The cards were slightly more expensive, not by much, but whatever. So you can do it different ways. It has to be cool. Mm-hmm. That's the biggest factor. It has to be something that you say, look at me, I'm awesome. And you can do that with animations. It can be with cool, shiny. I mean, there's a lot of different ways. I think you can borrow from other games for that. But the most important thing, I think, is for the cards to be cool enough. And you have to balance the cool factor and how rare they are as well. If you make them extremely rare, what happens is there's not enough supply, so it doesn't really drive the card prices down. If you make them too common, it does the same thing. You need to make them rare enough, but wantable enough that there are people who will put a lot of money into buying those cards. And yeah, that would do the job of driving other card prices down. You just need to find the balance. But as to how to do it, I mean, there's a million different ways. Animated, foil, animations, golden. I think anything works as long as it pops out. As long as when you match up versus your opponent, he sees the card and says, oh shit, that looks nice.
They already know how to balance it. Like, they did it in 2010, so it's like, that's not the problem. I do like the idea of the Duel Monsters 3D model popping up on the thing. That'd be cool. I do love the idea of a VR mode. It has been worked on in the past. There's a lot of code pointing towards it existing. And the thing that makes me laugh about it, though, is it's the artifact community, which is already kind of small. It's going to have a small subsection of it, of the cross-section of people that like artifact, but also own VR equipment, you know? So that's going to be kind of a very small niche market. But, I mean, obviously, you're not making a new game. You're just changing the look of an existing game. Yeah.
If the cards popped out, the monsters popped out of the cards, I think, because I remember seeing a lot of people complaining about how they feel like the combat system was too boring and not epic enough, because you just put on a lot of, you use your spells and improvements and put on the items, put down the monsters, and then boom, they clash and you go next lane. But if they were all animated, that would be so much more spectacular, and I think that would maybe make the game more interesting to look at while watching too. And I don't actually agree with that Artifact is boring to watch. I love, when I'm not streaming, I love watching Artifact. I watch Trunkroll and Grappler all the time. But I know a lot of people have that opinion, and I think that could really help with the epicness.
Yeah, animations would be really cool, but I think with how the engine was designed and how everything is set and the wideness of the boards, it can take away just as much as it can add. I think it's really hard to implement every card being animated onto a board like it is. It would just look a little weird. I mean, Hearthstone doesn't have any animations. It's just two cards hitting each other in the exact same way, and it works right. What Hearthstone has is the cards crash. There's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
I mean, I've hit the Ancient in Prize Gauntlet for over 2,000 damage, and it's just as if I hit it for 2 damage. And you just get disappointed. It doesn't give you that feeling of I'm awesome. It's like, okay, just another hit.
So speaking towards the cosmetic things, the major reason why cosmetics works is because you meet another player and you're like, whoa, what the hell is that? And the game plays the same. You're experiencing the same game and you don't feel like it's unfair. But you're also like, you want to know what that is. You want to have the thing that you see. And then that causes you to not only play the game more because it's interesting, but you purchase more packs. It puts more money into the game. And that's exactly what a fucking cosmetic system is supposed to do. However, there's a major reason why it didn't get launched in the first place. And it's because Portal 2 happened. In 2011, Valve shipped Portal 2, and that had single player and it had co-op. In 2011, TF2's hats were at the time a peak. And in Portal 2, for like 6 months, you could buy hats for the cooperative game mode for the robots. It was the exact same system, to the point where equipping the hats looked identical. It was just like different colors. It was the exact same system, but it failed because they discovered that when it's a 1v1 experience, or like just two people playing together, you're a lot less likely to want to be able to show it off, because you're only going to be showing it off to one person at a time, versus something like TF2 or CSGO, where you're upwards of 31 other people in casual type games. Now, I think this assumption of Artifact is actually misguided due to the fact that Portal 2 was cooperative, and most of the time you're playing with people you already know. Whereas Artifact, the games are significantly shorter than the time you're going to be spending in Portal 2 cooperative. Like, that's a couple hours at a time with one person. Artifact, you're going to be done in 20 minutes, and then you're going to move on to the next person. So you're going to see a hell of a lot more people.
So I think for these kinds of mental exercises, the best approach is not to try to objectively compare game to game. I think the easiest way to really look at this is try to put yourself in said situation. I think if I think to myself, okay, I'm going to play Portal with my friend, how excited do I feel about equipping a cool hat? Not much. If I'm going to go to a Dota game, how excited do I feel about getting the new pauldrons for Invoker? That's awesome. And maybe I can't really tell you why without thinking about it profoundly, but I just know it is. I think about Artifact, getting some really cool cards. It feels great in my head. And just for that reason, I think it works. I mean, maybe other people don't feel the same way, but sometimes using your intuition in these situations is the easiest way to look at it. Just putting yourself in the spot mentally and say, how would I feel about that? I think Artifact has the factor you need. In Artifact, I mean, even in Hearthstone, having golden cards is pretty cool. Even though they're not really hard to get, they just cost more to craft. It's something you enjoy. Single player, never really cared about it. I don't know why, but I just know it's true for myself. You get enough people to think about it. If they all agree that it would look cool, if they would feel cool, probably will be.
Something that has been discussed, and I've seen this point brought up a couple times, is when you equip like an unusual hat in TF2, you equip an immortal in, or an art, whatever, in Dota 2, or a knife in CSGO. People are going to see that through the majority of the game. versus a holo card or whatever ends up being a rare version of a card needs to be drawn, played, and in the lane for it to be able to be seen. So it's a lot less likely for that card to have its supposed value, or like its assumed value, be seen for as long.
That is true, but there's so many other things they could make cosmetics for, right? The imps, you have couriers in Dota. It's basically the same system. You can change the board. You said there was already a different board in the beta, so we know that's possible. It doesn't have to be the cards themselves. There's so many elements. Even Hearthstone has a clickable board. You can click stuff and it reacts. And Valve already knows, like Valve knows about Hearthstone. They know what works there. They know the cards will have value and people will want them. I don't think it's an oversight for them to think that it's the same as the portal thing.
I don't think it's so much about having the item out the entire time. I think it's more about the anticipation of your opponent discovering the cool thing you have. So let's say I have an Annihilation card that's foil, it has a different animation. I'm getting in the game with a new opponent. I can't wait to draw my Annihilation card. I can't wait to annihilate him with a $300 card he's never seen before. I might use it once, but I can't wait to flex and say, I got this, check it out. It's just like anything in real life where you're working towards something. The journey really is the fun part. Sure, when you get it, you have that moment of a really feel good feeling, but it's the entire anticipation towards that point when you know something cool is gonna happen. That hooks you in. So I don't think you need to have it on board nonstop.
As for, we touched on it a little bit before. Speaking specifically to puzzle mode itself, do you think that could do anything to the player numbers?
I really think so. I've played through most of the puzzles in the leaked puzzle mode. I think I haven't played so many that people have made themselves, but the ones that are in the game. And while it's still very flawed because it's obviously not finished, I really like the idea because that's kind of what I like about Artifact in general, that it's like a puzzle you have to solve by putting down your cards. And with the puzzle mode, I think that could also be nice for mobile, because then what Trunk said, then it wouldn't need an internet connection. And it's also it's a campaign, and if you can also experience the lore, I think that would also maybe draw in some RPG fans. I don't know how
many people here played Hex, the TCG.
Oh, I did.
They had a campaign mode that I had so much fun on. It's basically an entire story, like an RPG, where you start off with a very basic deck and you would build it up towards the end and go through a whole story of defeating these villains and stuff. And basically it tells the whole story of Hex through a card game, and your card game was your army. Basically you were building up. You even had cards that were non-playable in the PvP mode and the competitive mode, just part of the story mode. So it was very well implemented. Probably I had more fun in that than I had in the actual game itself for competing. But if it's done well, and especially if the workshop is done well, if you can create your own stories, I think it could be very successful. If it's done badly, I think it can bring nothing to the game. Also, on a side note, Hex was a real TCG. You could actually trade cards. I don't really care much about card trading, but I think the biggest downfall and the biggest reason I was disappointed that you couldn't trade cards in Artifact was because you couldn't give Twitch giveaways for cards or card packs to viewers.
Yes.
And I would have loved to, okay, you know what? Next 2 wins, we are going to give a pack to a random winner. Just something that simple gets people excited, gets you other free ways to get cards, and it doesn't affect Valve whatsoever. So not being able to give away even packs, it doesn't have to be cards, was a really big downer for me, because I did want to do that on stream, but what can you do? And other streams would have liked that too, for sure.
But you said if it's done badly, it can hinder the game. How can a mobile port be done badly?
No, I was just gonna say one funny thing, like for example, how they sped up the card draw and the animations, like Eclipse. Seems like it's probably to speed up games in general for mobile. But and some people said that it's a bad change, but I actually think it's great, even if it looks a bit goofy. It's really funny, and I really like the thought of them speeding up the game so that they're faster for mobile, but also for the PC version. But I really hope they don't take away the complexity, though, because that's one thing I think a mobile version would benefit from if it was less complex. But I don't want my Artifact on my computer to be less complex,